Every year, somewhere between booking a flight and packing a bag, people fall in love with a version of Greece that exists primarily on Pinterest. Every year, somewhere between booking a flight and packing a bag, people fall in love with a version of Greece that exists primarily on Pinterest. White walls, blue domes, a glass of something cold on a terrace above a caldera that looks like it was designed specifically to make everyone who sees it feel that their regular life is slightly inadequate. Donkeys on cobblestone paths. Fish so fresh it was swimming that morning. And Greece delivers all of that. It genuinely does. Greece is one of those rare destinations where the fantasy and the reality are close enough that most people arrive and think, yes, this is exactly what I came for. The problem is not that Greece disappoints. The problem is that the version most tourists experience is about 30% of what Greece actually is, and the other 70%, quieter, stranger, more historically layered, significantly less photographed, is sitting right there largely ignored because everyone is following the same map to the same islands in the same 2 months of the year. This video is about the mistakes that keep people inside that 30% and how to get out of it. Start with the Santorini problem, because it is the organizing mistake around which most others arrange themselves. Santorini is genuinely beautiful. This is not under dispute. The caldera views from Oia and Phyra are among the most dramatic landscapes in Europe, full stop. The volcanic beaches, the red sand at Akrotiri, the black sand at Prisa, are unlike anything on the mainland. The local wine, grown in volcanic soil that produces something found almost nowhere else on Earth, is excellent in a way that surprises people who weren't expecting to care about wine. But Santorini in July and August is also one of the most crowded places in the Mediterranean. The famous Oia sunset, which every photograph makes look like a private revelation, is in practice watched by several thousand people simultaneously, shoulder to shoulder on a narrow path, many of them holding phones aloft in a way that suggests they are less interested in the sunset than in proving they were there for it. The cruise ship problem compounds this considerably. On peak days, Santorini receives multiple large cruise ships, adding thousands of day visitors to an island that is already at capacity. They arrive mid-morning, fill the main paths and restaurants, and leave by late afternoon. If you time your movements around this, earlier mornings, later afternoons, lunch at 1 in the afternoon when the day trippers are eating and the light is high anyway, the island becomes more manageable. But it requires planning that most tourists don't know they need. The deeper mistake is treating Santorini as the destination rather than one part of a larger Greek experience. Tourists who spend their entire Greek trip on Santorini miss a country of astonishing variety. They also pay Santorini prices for everything, which are among the highest in Greece, sometimes rivaling major Western European cities for accommodation and dining, without necessarily getting proportionally more out of the experience. The island question deserves more attention than it usually gets, because Greece has around 200 inhabited islands and most tourists visit approximately 2 of them on rotation. Mykonos and Santorini absorb an enormous share of international visitors, and both have been so thoroughly shaped by that volume that they now function less as Greek islands and more as luxury tourism products that happen to be located in Greece. That's not a dismissal. Both have real beauty and real appeal. But it's worth being honest about what they are and aren't. The islands that tend to produce the most devoted, return-obsessed travelers are almost never the famous ones. They're places like Naxos, which is larger and greener than most Cycladic islands, has excellent local food, a medieval hilltop town that functions as an actual living community rather than a boutique backdrop, and a fraction of Mykonos's crowds and prices. Or Milos, with rock formations and colored beaches that are visually extraordinary and a tourism infrastructure that is still human in scale. Or Hydra, which has no cars or motorbikes, only donkeys and your own feet, and an atmosphere of quiet that feels almost shocking after an hour in Athens. Or the Ionian Islands, which are geographically and culturally distinct from the Aegean Islands most tourists gravitate toward. Kefalonia, Lefkada, Zakynthos, these have a Venetian influence that gives them a completely different architectural character, beaches that rival anything in the Aegean, and a pace that tends to suit travelers who want beauty without the machinery of mass tourism operating at full volume around them. Choosing a lesser-known island is not a sacrifice. It's usually an upgrade. The meal is better because the restaurant doesn't need to turn tables every 40 minutes. The beach is better because there's room on it. The local you talk to is having a real conversation with you rather than their 14th tourist interaction of the morning. Now to Athens, because Athens is the mistake hiding in plain sight. An enormous number of tourists treat Athens as a transit point. They land, spend one night, visit the Acropolis the next morning, eat something near Monastiraki, and then head to the ferry port for whichever island is first on the list. Athens, in this itinerary, is a box to check before the real trip begins. This is one of the more significant misreads in European travel. Athens is a genuinely extraordinary city, not in the polished, easy-to-digest way that some European capitals are, but in a way that requires a little patience and rewards it substantially. It is a city of layers. Ancient ruins sitting next to Byzantine churches, sitting next to neoclassical buildings, sitting next to street art that covers the walls of neighborhoods the guidebooks haven't quite caught up with yet. The National Archaeological Museum alone, one of the great museums anywhere in the world, containing artifacts that reframe what you thought you knew about ancient civilization, is routinely undervisited because people are in a hurry to get to the ferry. The neighborhoods are where Athens lives. Kakaki, south of the Acropolis, is residential and calm and full of the kind of coffee shops and small restaurants that serve the people who actually live there. Exarchia is politically charged, visually dense, covered in murals, and unlike anywhere else in Greece. Syrai is where the city goes at night in a way that has nothing to do with tourism. Pangradi has a Sunday farmers market and a square that fills with Athenians in the late afternoon in a scene of such ordinary, contented life that it's easy to forget you're a visitor. Give Athens 3 days minimum. Ideally 4. The Acropolis is not the city. It's the opening argument. Timing in Greece follows a pattern similar to other Mediterranean destinations, but with some specifics worth knowing. July and August are when Greece receives the majority of its annual visitors, when temperatures in Athens regularly exceed 35 degrees Celsius, when the famous islands are at maximum capacity, and when accommodation prices peak across the board. This is also, for many people, the only time they can go, and if that's the constraint, the answer is not to stay home. It's to plan more carefully and choose locations that handle volume better than Santorini and Mykonos do in August. May, June, and September are where the intelligent money goes. The weather in these months is excellent, genuinely warm, reliably sunny, with sea temperatures that are entirely swimmable by late May and remain perfect well into October. The crowds are thinner. The prices drop meaningfully, sometimes by 40 or 50% compared to peak August rates. The locals are more present and less exhausted by the tourism cycle. October is underrated in a way that deserves direct acknowledgement. The light in Greece in October is different from summer light, lower, warmer, more golden, the kind of light that makes ordinary streets look like paintings. The sea is still warm enough to swim. The tourists are mostly gone. Restaurants are cooking for the people who live there rather than for a rotation of visitors. It is, in the view of many people who have experienced Greece across multiple seasons, the best month to be there, and almost nobody books it intentionally. The shoulder season caveat is that some smaller islands and some tourism-dependent businesses begin to close in October and are largely shut by November. This requires checking in advance, but it doesn't disqualify the season. It just means you choose destinations that operate year-round, which Athens, Thessaloniki, Rhodes, Crete, and several others do without interruption. Food in Greece is an area where tourists consistently underperform relative to what's available, and the reason is almost always geography. The restaurants immediately adjacent to famous sites, the tavernas around the Acropolis, the waterfront places in every tourist port, anything with a menu translated into 6 languages and a photograph of each dish, are operating on a logic of volume and convenience that is not compatible with the logic of good cooking. The food is usually fine. It is almost never the food that will make you want to call someone from the table and describe what you're eating. That food is a 10-minute walk away, in the direction away from the landmark. Greek cuisine is also more regionally varied than its international reputation suggests. The food of Crete, with its emphasis on olive oil, wild greens, legumes, and a particular kind of rustic, produce-driven cooking, is distinct from the food of the Aegean Islands, which is distinct from the food of the northern mainland, which draws on Ottoman and Balkan influences that produce dishes most visitors to the islands never encounter. Thessaloniki deserves specific mention here because it is home to what many Greeks themselves consider the best food culture in the country. The city has a food identity built on its history as a crossroads of civilizations: Byzantine, Ottoman, Sephardic, Jewish, Greek. And the result is a table that is more complex, more layered, and more surprising than the olive and feta shorthand that represents Greek food internationally. Most tourists never go to Thessaloniki. That's their loss and the city's quiet advantage. A practical note: lunch in Greece is the main meal, not dinner. The proper Greek lunch happens between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, runs long, and is the meal the kitchen is most invested in. Tourists who eat a quick lunch and save their appetite for dinner are optimizing in the wrong direction. There's a historical depth problem in Greece that's worth naming because it's subtle and it shapes the whole experience. Greece contains some of the most significant archaeological and historical sites in Western civilization. The Acropolis, Delphi, Olympia, Epidaurus, Mycenae, Knossos, and Crete. These are not merely old and impressive. They are the physical remains of events and ideas that shaped the world you currently live in. Standing in the theater at Epidaurus, which has acoustics so perfect that a whisper on stage reaches the back row, or at Delphi, where the ancient world sent its most difficult questions to be answered, is not a sightseeing experience in the conventional sense. It's something closer to an encounter with a deep root of human history. Most tourists visit these places in 90 minutes with an audio guide and move on. That's fine as a first pass, but it leaves almost everything on the table. The tourists who find Greece genuinely transformative, who come back, who think about it for years afterward, are almost always the ones who arrived with some context, who read something before they went, who stood somewhere and understood, at least partially, what they were standing in the middle of. A few hours with a good book about Greek history before the trip changes the entire register of the experience. The ruins stop being ruins and start being the remains of something that was once fully alive. The geography of the country starts to make sense in a way that it simply doesn't without that context. The stories attached to the places, and suddenly you're not just looking at old stones. You're standing inside a narrative that has been running for 3,000 years. One final thing, and it's the one that underlies most of what's been said here. Greece is frequently visited quickly and rarely experienced slowly, and that's a mismatch with what the country actually offers. Greece is a place that opens up over time. The first day in a new location, you're orienting. The second day, you're starting to find your rhythm. By the third day, you have a coffee place and a beach spot, and a rough sense of how the afternoon light falls on the hillside above the village, and you've probably had one conversation that surprised you with how much it said about where you are and how people actually live there. Most tourist itineraries allocate 1 or 2 nights per location and then move on before that opening up has a chance to happen. The result is a trip that covers a lot of ground and occasionally feels, in retrospect, like it was less than the sum of its parts. The tourists who leave Greece most deeply satisfied are almost always the ones who chose one region, one island, maybe one mainland destination, and stayed long enough to let it become familiar. Familiarity in travel is not the enemy of discovery. It's the condition that makes the real discoveries possible. Greece will give you exactly as much as you give it time to deliver. Most people give it a week and a half and a packed itinerary. The ones who give it room come back changed. Not because Greece is magic, but because they finally let it be what it actually is instead of rushing through what they thought it should be. Thanks for watching. If you found this useful, smash that like button and subscribe to When to Travel. We're all about helping you make smarter travel decisions. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And hey, if you think your friends need this, share it. Comment below with your next destination or your biggest travel question. I'm reading all of them. Let's go.